At Christmas dinner, my rich grandpa handed each of us a check. My parents laughed. It's just for show, a fake check again. I smiled and tucked mine away. Next morning, the bank called, only one check cleared. Grandpa just said, "Good. Now I know who's real." My Christmas dinner started with a joke, a tired old man's prank, or so my parents thought. They laughed. I just said, "Thank you." That one simple choice didn't just change my life, it tore my entire family apart. My parents laughed. A high, tinkling, dismissive sound that was all too familiar. My mom, Denise, rolled her eyes, her smile tight as she waved her hand. "Oh, Dad, are we doing the pretend check thing again? So cute." My dad, Charles, chuckled, swirling the expensive wine in his glass. The man loves his jokes. "Just play along, Sam." But I couldn't laugh. I looked at Grandpa Walter across the polished dining table. He looked tired, worn, a sadness in his eyes I hadn't noticed before. "Thank you, Grandpa," I said, my voice barely a whisper, and I gently tucked the pristine white envelope into my coat pocket. My parents barely noticed, already back to boasting about their new car. They truly thought it was just another one of his harmless games, an old man's quirk. They had no idea. I didn't either. Not really. But the next morning, something compelled me. A strange, almost guilty feeling, like I was about to do something illicit. I found myself walking into the bank. My heart hammered against my ribs as I handed the check to the teller. She was quiet for a long, agonizing moment, her gaze fixed on the paper. Then she looked up, her face perfectly professional, utterly unreadable. "Your deposit cleared, Ms. Reed." 5 simple words. And just like that, the world shifted on its axis. It wasn't a joke anymore. My breath caught in my throat. My name is Samantha Reed. I'm 30 years old, and if you want to understand why those 5 words hit me like a physical blow, you need to understand my family. You need to understand my parents, Charles and Denise Reed. And you need to understand the house I grew up in. My parents cared about one thing, one singular, all-consuming obsession: looking perfect. Their entire lives were a meticulously crafted performance, a constant audition for an audience that didn't exist. We lived in a sprawling, beautiful house, nestled in a neighborhood where every house was a monument to flawless manicured lawns and brand new cars. My mother, Denise, had chosen our house specifically for its grand, winding staircase. "It's so impressive, Samantha," she'd gush, "perfect for first impressions." The inside was just as impressive, and just as utterly devoid of warmth. We had a living room that was strictly off limits for living. The carpet was pristine white. The sofas, also white, were covered in some expensive, scratchy fabric no one dared to touch. "Isn't it elegant, Samantha?" she'd ask, her eyes gleaming with pride. I'd just nod, a silent, obedient child. I still remember the terror when, at 8 years old, I spilled a single, tiny drop of water on that sacred white sofa. The way my mother screamed, her face contorting, you would have thought I'd set the whole house ablaze. She scrubbed that minuscule spot for an hour, her breath coming in sharp, angry hisses. "This is why we can't have nice things," she whispered, but her gaze, cold and accusing, was fixed entirely on me. After that, I never, ever went into that room alone again. My entire childhood felt like a never-ending series of photo shoots. My mother was obsessed. Every Christmas, Easter, every single vacation, we had to pose. We had to look happy. We had to look perfect. I remember one particularly agonizing Christmas photo when I was 12. My mother had forced us all into matching, incredibly itchy red sweaters. I was frowning miserably. "Samantha, smile." My dad, Charles, snapped, already in position by the fireplace, one hand casually in his pocket, practicing his most relaxed smile. "It's itchy," I mumbled, trying to pull at the suffocating wool. "Stop it," my mother hissed, her voice low and dangerously sharp. She grabbed my shoulders, yanking me towards the camera. "Your father and I work hard to give you this life. The least you can do is look grateful for one picture. Now smile." So I did. A fake, tight, desperate smile. But my eyes, I remember, looked utterly sad. My mother, oblivious, loved that picture. "We look like we're from a magazine," she declared, framing it and placing it on the grand piano for all to see. Hard work. That was their favorite phrase. We've worked so hard for this life, they'd proudly announce at their lavish parties. And oh, how they loved parties. Filling their perfect, cold house with other perfect, cold people. The rooms would echo with loud, fake laughter and reek of expensive wine and cloying perfume. My designated role? The perfect, quiet daughter. I'd wear whatever dress my mother picked, offer polite smiles, take coats. But the moment I thought no one was watching, I'd slip away to my room, burrowing into a book, finding solace in stories that felt more real than my own life. Once, a woman I didn't know followed me upstairs, looking for the bathroom. She found me curled on my bed, reading. She smiled, a little sheepishly. "Hiding?" she asked. I just nodded. Her gaze swept around my room, the only room in that entire house that felt lived in. Posters on the walls, a perpetually messy desk, overflowing bookshelves. "Your parents are a lot," she said, then chuckled, slightly embarrassed. "I'm Mrs. Gable." Later, I overheard my mother talking about it. "Oh, Samantha is just so shy," she chirped, in her high, bright party voice. "She's in her awkward phase. We're hoping she grows out of it." I wasn't shy. I just hated their friends. I hated the noise. I hated the crushing fakeness of it all. The devastating truth was, their hard work was a lie. The perfect house, the shiny new cars, the endless parties, the untouchable white sofas, it all flowed from one source. It all came from my grandfather, Walter Reed. Grandpa Walter was nothing, absolutely nothing, like my parents. He was a self-made man, forged from grit and determination. He started his construction company with just a single truck and 2 ladders, building it, brick by brick, into one of the biggest, most respected firms in the entire state. He was old-school wealthy, the kind of man who still polished his own boots and read the newspaper until his fingers were stained with ink. My dad worked at the company, of course. His title? Vice President of Development. But I spent a summer helping Grandpa with paperwork once. I saw the numbers. My dad's development mostly involved golfing and taking clients to ridiculously expensive lunches. Grandpa's company paid for my parents' house. It paid for their cars. It paid for those pristine white carpets. My parents loved Grandpa's money, absolutely adored it, but they were utterly embarrassed by him. He was too real, too blunt. He wore old-fashioned suits and drank cheap, black coffee. I remember one party. A man was droning on to my father about stocks. Grandpa walked up. "You don't invest in stocks, Walter?" The man chuckled, condescendingly. "No," Grandpa said, his voice deep and steady. "I invest in steel and concrete. And people who show up on time. Things you can touch." The man looked utterly bewildered. My father's face turned beet red. "More wine, anyone?" he stammered, frantically changing the subject. Later that night, I heard them arguing in their bedroom. "He humiliated me, Denise," my father fumed. "Talking about steel and concrete like some common laborer." "I know, Charles, I know," my mother sighed, her voice tired. "He just doesn't understand. He's from a different time." They loved showing him off, a trophy. My father, the one who built this city, my dad would boast, slinging an arm around Grandpa for a photo op. But they never loved his values. They never truly listened to him. They saw him as their own personal bank. An old, slightly fussy bank, yes, but one that would always give them money. They never once imagined that the bank might close. To my parents, I was a failure. Their greatest disappointment. They never said it aloud, not in those exact words. They were far too polite for such bluntness. Instead, they used other, more insidious phrases. "Samantha is just finding her way. She's so creative. She's wasting her potential." That was their favorite. Wasting her potential. My parents' definition of success was suffocatingly narrow. It meant a grand house in their neighborhood. It meant a real job, a doctor, a lawyer, a vice president of development. It meant marrying someone who also had a real job and a grand house. I had none of those things. I lived in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment in Portland. It was small. The floors creaked. The kitchen was ridiculously tiny. My parents absolutely hated it. It's so small, my mother exclaimed on her first and only visit, looking at my old, comfortable sofa like it carried a contagious disease. And the neighborhood, Samantha? Do you feel safe here? I love it, Mom, I said, and I meant it. My apartment was mine. The walls were painted a warm, soft yellow. My design sketches and favorite paintings were pinned up everywhere. My bookshelves overflowed with stories. It was a space for living, not for performing. It was messy. It was comfortable. It was real. My job was their other major problem. I was a freelance interior designer. A decorator, my father had sneered when I told him. A designer, Dad, I corrected, my voice firm. I help people make their homes functional and beautiful. There's no money in paint swatches, Sam, he'd said, shaking his head. It's a hobby. You wasted a college degree on a hobby. You should have gone to law school. I almost did. They pushed me relentlessly. A law degree is so respectable, my mother cooed. Think of the potential. I was utterly miserable. One night, I was crying, hunched over my LSAT prep books, when Grandpa Walter called. You sound terrible, he stated, cutting straight to the point. I'm fine, Grandpa, I lied. No, you're not. You sound like you're swallowing rocks. What is it? So I told him. I poured out everything, how I didn't want to be a lawyer, how I wanted to create, to work with color and light and space, to help people build homes that felt real. He was quiet for a long time. I braced myself, expecting his anger, his disappointment. All right, he finally said, his voice surprisingly gentle. Come over on Saturday. Wear old clothes. When I arrived at his house, he didn't usher me into the formal living room. He led me to his workshop in the garage. It was a big, dusty space, smelling wonderfully of sawdust and oil. He pointed to a pile of old wood in the corner. I need a table for my entryway, he announced. Let's build one. We spent that entire weekend in that garage. He didn't just tell me what to do, he taught me. He taught me how to measure, how to cut. He taught me about different kinds of wood, about the grain, about joints. It's not about the paint, Sam, he'd said, running his calloused hand over a piece of smooth, sanded oak. The paint is the easy part. It's about the bones, the foundation. If the joints are weak, the table will fall. Doesn't matter how pretty the paint is. My hands were sore. I had blisters. Sawdust was matted in my hair. I had never, not once, been happier. When we finished, we had a small, simple, beautiful table. It was strong. That's real work, Sam, he said, placing a heavy, proud hand on my shoulder. Honest work. Don't you ever let anyone tell you different. I still have that table. It sits in my tiny apartment. I put my keys on it every day. It's the most valuable thing I own. Grandpa Walter was the only one who truly understood. The only one who asked about my work, not my salary. What problem are you solving today, Sam? He'd ask on the phone. I'd tell him about a small apartment needing clever storage or a new family with no budget for a nursery. And what did you do? He'd prompt. I'd excitedly explain my ideas. I'm building a bench with storage underneath. And I'm painting the walls a warm color to make the room feel bigger. Good, he'd grunt. Smart. Honest. That's my girl. He was the only one who truly saw me. My parents saw wasted potential. Grandpa saw my work. He had a saying, one I heard often, usually after he'd witnessed someone being rude or flashy or just plain fake. He'd watch them, his eyes sharp, assessing. Then he'd look at me and say, money doesn't test people, Sam. Gratitude does. I didn't really grasp what he meant then. I just thought it was another one of his grandpa sayings. What do you mean, Grandpa? I asked him once, in a diner, after he'd left a 50% tip for our obviously exhausted waitress. You watch how people treat those they don't need, he said, sipping his black coffee. You watch how they say thank you. You watch if they mean it. A person can have all the money in the world, Sam, but if they aren't grateful, they're poor. They're just an empty room. I nodded, thinking I understood. I didn't. Not really. I never realized that all those years, he wasn't just teaching me. He was watching me. And he was watching my parents. He always said, money doesn't test people. Gratitude does. I just never realized that Christmas dinner, that quiet, polished, superficial dinner, was the final test. The room, my parents' impeccably decorated dining room, smelled faintly of pine and roasted duck. My mother had been planning the menu for weeks. The long, dark wood table, polished to a mirror shine, was set with her best china, the plates with the thin gold leaf edge, and crystal glasses that caught the candlelight, scattering tiny rainbows onto the white walls. The centerpiece was a monstrosity, a mountain of pine boughs, silver balls, and red berries, so huge I could barely see my dad across from me. The atmosphere was stiff, as always. Christmas with my parents was never fun. It was a meticulously choreographed performance. My mother, Denise, in her perfect red silk dress, her hair immaculate, wore a smile that was pulled so tight, I worried it might snap. She was anxious. "Charles, do you think the duck is too dry?" she whispered to my dad. "It's fine, Denise." "Everything is fine," he mumbled, but his eyes were glued to his phone, discreetly hidden under the table, undoubtedly checking the stock market. "I just want everything to be perfect for your father," she insisted. Grandpa Walter sat at the head of the table, looking small in the enormous high-backed chair. He wore an old, dark green wool sweater, clean, but definitely old. I saw my mother's subtle glance at it, her silent judgment. I just wanted to be invisible, dressed in a simple black dress, sipping my water, counting the seconds until I could escape back to my small, quiet apartment. The conversation revolved, as always, around my parents. Our trip to Aspen was just divine, my mother gushed to Grandpa. "We're thinking of buying a small place there." Grandpa, who hadn't touched his duck, just grunted. "You have a place here." "Oh, Dad." Mom's high, fake laugh tinkled through the room. "It's an investment. Charles is so smart about investments." "Is that right, Charles?" Grandpa asked, his gaze steady. "The market is very strong, Walter." My dad puffed out his chest. "You have to know when to move." I watched Grandpa. He just nodded slowly, took a bite of duck, chewed thoughtfully. He looked so tired. After the main course, my mother cleared the plates, bringing out a ridiculously ornate dessert, something with chocolate and gold flakes. Then, Grandpa cleared his throat. It was a quiet sound, but in that vast, silent room, it resonated like a drum. "I have something for you," he said. My parents froze, looking at him, a flicker of polite curiosity in their eyes. He reached into his pocket and pulled out 3 plain, white, business-sized envelopes. He slid one across the table to my dad, one to my mom, and one, all the way down the table, to me. "A little Christmas gift for each of you," he said, his voice quiet, unassuming. My parents exchanged a glance. Then, they both laughed. My mother, Denise, was first, her high, tinkling party laugh. "Oh, Dad," she chirped, picking up the envelope but making no move to open it. "You're still playing Santa, huh? This is so cute." She fanned herself with the envelope, as if it were a joke in itself. "What is it this year?" "A check for 1,000,000 I love yous." My dad, Charles, chuckled, a smirk playing on his lips. He picked up his envelope, tapping it idly on the table. "The man loves his jokes," he said, looking at me, a condescending wink in his eye. "Just play along, Sam. He loves it." He didn't open his either, just set it beside his wine glass like a discarded napkin. I didn't laugh. My gaze met Grandpa's. His eyes. I will never, ever forget his eyes. They weren't twinkling with festive cheer. They weren't happy. They were profoundly, deeply sad. He looked utterly exhausted. He watched my mother mock his gift. He watched my father dismiss it. Then his eyes found mine. I picked up my envelope. "Thank you, Grandpa," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but I meant every syllable. He held my gaze for a second, and then a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "Keep it safe," he whispered, so softly my parents didn't hear a word, before he finally looked away. My heart did a strange, tight little flip. Keep it safe. What did that mean? I held the envelope in my lap. It felt heavy. It felt important. My mother had already forgotten hers, leaving it on the sideboard amidst a stack of dirty dessert plates, already deep into planning her New Year's Eve party. My dad had tucked his into his suit jacket pocket, probably without even thinking, like you'd pocket a business card you intended to discard. The joke was over. The performance continued. I slipped my envelope into my coat pocket, my hand clutching it tightly. I didn't understand what was happening. Not yet. But deep in my bones, I knew something vital had just broken. Sitting there at that perfectly polished table, I felt the crack. The foundation was giving way. When it was finally time to leave, I hugged Grandpa goodbye. His embrace was tighter than usual. He held on for an extra second, whispering into my hair, "Drive careful, Sam." "I will, Grandpa." "I love you." "I love you too, child," he murmured back, his voice thick with emotion. "You're a good girl. You're real." My parents waved from their impeccably lit doorway, the harsh light from their chandelier spilling onto the perfect lawn. "Merry Christmas," my mother called, already turning, already closing the door. "Don't forget to call your aunt." They were already moving on. I sat in my cold car for a full minute, my hand still in my pocket, clutching that white envelope. It didn't feel like a joke at all. The drive back to my tiny apartment in Portland was eerily quiet. The Christmas lights blurred past my window, red and green and blue, but they offered no cheer. My car's heater was broken, so a bitter cold seeped in. One hand on the wheel, the other clenched around that envelope in my coat pocket. "Keep it safe." His words echoed. "So cute." My mother's mocking laugh. "The man loves his jokes." My father's smirk. A cold, heavy anger began to settle deep in my stomach. They hadn't even opened them. They hadn't even looked. They had laughed at him. Laughed at his gift, right to his face. When I finally reached my building, I practically ran up the stairs, desperate to be inside my own space. I slammed the door shut, leaning against it, breathing hard. My apartment, though messy, felt wonderfully warm. I flicked on a single small lamp. My hands trembling slightly, I made myself a cup of tea. Then, I sank onto the floor, my back against my worn, comfortable couch. The envelope lay on the coffee table. Just a plain, white business envelope. My name, Samantha Reed, was written on the front in a strong, familiar handwriting. I stared at it for a long, long time. A part of me was terrified to open it. What if it was a joke? What if it was a fake check for 1,000,000 hugs, just like my mother had said? After all this intense emotion, this heavy feeling, I would feel utterly stupid. But what if it was real? I picked it up, my fingers tracing the edges. I slid my finger under the flap, opening it carefully, not wanting to rip it. I pulled out the paper inside. It was a check. A real, honest-to-God cashier's check. From his personal bank. My eyes flew to the pay to the order of line, Samantha Reed. Then, to the small box with the numbers. My breath simply stopped. $100,000. $500. $100,500. I read it again. And again. The signature at the bottom was his. Walter Reed. It was real. I sat there on my floor, in my tiny apartment, and just stared. My chest felt impossibly tight. I think I was supposed to be happy. Excited. I should have been jumping up and down, right? I'm rich. But I felt none of that. Instead, I felt a crushing weight. This wasn't a gift, not in the way most people understood it. This was a statement. This was a test. And my parents had failed. He had given them the same envelope, the same chance. And they had laughed. They had tossed it aside like trash. He knew. He knew they would. And he had given me one too. And I had simply said, thank you. It wasn't a test of me. It was a test of them. He was just showing me the results. A sudden, hot wave of respect for my grandfather washed over me, so sharp it almost hurt. He was smarter than all of them. Stronger. And then a deep, cold sadness for my parents. They were so blind, so utterly lost in their perfect, sterile world of white carpets and potential that they couldn't see a real thing when it was right in front of them. I didn't know what to do with the check. Cashing it felt wrong. It felt like it was about money, and this wasn't about money. It was about something else entirely. I got up and walked to my desk. On it sat a small, dark wooden box with a smooth lid. It was the table I built with Grandpa in his workshop, scaled down. I kept my real treasures in it. I opened the lid. The scent of cedar and old paper filled the air. Inside, there wasn't much. A photo of me and him, covered in sawdust, grinning at the camera. A letter from my best friend, Zoe, when I moved to Portland, telling me, "You are brave." A small, pressed flower from the first bouquet a client ever gave me. Things that truly mattered. I took the check, folded it once, and placed it inside the box, right on top of the photo. I closed the lid. It felt right. It was safe. It was where it belonged. It was a symbol of respect. It was proof that he saw me. I didn't sleep that night. My mind raced. What should I do? The next morning, I woke up feeling hungover, even without drinking. I made coffee, my gaze fixed on the wooden box. $100,000. That was a life-changing amount of money. It would pay off my student loans. It would let me rent that real design studio I'd always dreamed of. It would give me security. Then a new small, ugly thought crept in. What if my parents were right? What if it was a game? What if this was the real test? What if he was waiting to see what I would do? If I cashed it immediately, would that make me greedy? Just as bad as them? But if I didn't cash it, would I be disrespecting his gift? Would I be a fool? I felt utterly confused, like I was trapped in one of those old stories with a riddle I couldn't solve. I had to know. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about knowing if this was real. Was this entire crazy thing real, or was I just imagining it all? Curiosity got the better of me. But it was more than that. It was a desperate need for truth. I told myself I wasn't cashing it. I was just checking. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking so hard I could barely log into my banking app. I took the check out of the box, feeling a pang of betrayal, as if I were desecrating it. I laid it flat on the table. Mobile deposit. I took a picture of the front. My hand was shaking so badly the picture was blurry. I took it again. Then a picture of the back, for mobile deposit only. The app spun for a moment, then, deposit submitted for $100,500. I felt sick. I put the check back in the wooden box, closing the lid. I felt small. I felt like I had taken this beautiful, heavy symbol of respect and tried to turn it into mere money. I felt like my parents. The next few hours were torture. I sat on my sofa, staring at my phone, trying to work, but my mind was blank. Every buzz, every notification made me jump. I was waiting for the deposit failed email, the insufficient funds notice, the just kidding text from Grandpa. I was waiting for a sign, for any sign, to find out what was real. But the words submitted just hung on my phone screen. I flipped the phone face down. I felt dirty. Cheap. What had I done? I had taken his gift, his test, and treated it like a lottery ticket. I went to the kitchen and scrubbed my hands, but the feeling wouldn't wash away. I paced my apartment for an hour, telling myself it would be rejected. The bank would send the email. Then I'd know. I'd know it was all a game, and I would put the check back in the box and never look at it again. That would be the end of it. I was almost hoping it would fail. But my phone remained silent. The silence was deafening. After another hour, I couldn't take it anymore. I picked up the phone. My banking app was still open. I refreshed the page. My heart stopped. No, it didn't just stop. It felt like it was grabbed and squeezed. The pending status was gone. The check was listed under completed transactions. And my account balance, the number at the top of the screen, it had changed. I was looking at a number with 5 zeros at the end. It was real. The deposit hadn't failed. It hadn't been stopped. It wasn't a joke. It was real. Your deposit has cleared, Ms. Reed. The teller's words echoed in my head, but the app was right there, undeniable. It was just a number on a screen, but it felt like a mountain had just dropped into my living room. My hands shook so hard I dropped the phone onto the couch. It was real. I sat down, burying my head in my hands. I wasn't happy. I was terrified. Because if my check was real, it meant their checks were real, too. And they had laughed. They had left them on the table. Oh, God. I didn't know what to do. Should I call them? Mom, Dad, that check you laughed at? It was real. Should I call Grandpa? Grandpa, why did you do this? I did nothing. I just sat there, frozen. The number on my phone screen felt like it was burning a hole in my apartment floor. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour, I don't know. Then my phone rang. The screen lit up, Mom. My blood turned to ice. This was it. The other shoe. I let it ring once. Twice. 3 times. I wiped my sweaty hand on my jeans. I picked it up. Hello. My voice was a tiny whisper. Samantha, why didn't you pick up? Her voice was high and tight. It wasn't my mom's voice, it was sharper, laced with barely contained hysteria. I was in the bathroom, Mom. I'll tell you what's up, she snapped. I just had the most mortifying experience of my life. I stayed silent, my heart pounding. Your father and I were just, cleaning up from Christmas. And I found that envelope your grandfather gave me, the one he gave your father, too. We were laughing about it. Her voice trembled, trying to sound casual, but failing spectacularly. We thought, oh, what the heck? Let's see what the joke is. So, I called the bank, just to ask the manager. She was talking so fast she was running out of breath. The manager said the checks were stopped. He said your grandfather had put a stop payment on them yesterday morning. He humiliated me, Samantha. He let us. How could he? I still said nothing. My mind was reeling. Did you talk to your grandfather today? She asked, her voice suddenly cold, suspicious. No, why? Don't lie to me, Samantha. I'm not lying, Mom. A long, cold silence stretched between us. I could hear her ragged breathing. The bank manager, she continued, her voice dangerously low now, said that one check did go through. A large one. This morning. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Ours were stopped, but yours went through. I couldn't speak. My throat was utterly closed. He's playing favorites again, she shrieked. The sudden volume made me flinch. It was a sound I hadn't heard in years, a sound from my childhood. The sound of the spilled water on the white sofa. It was raw, ugly jealousy. After everything we do for him. We host him. We take care of him. We manage his life. And you. You show up twice a year, and he gives you. What did he give you, Samantha? Mom, she demanded. I couldn't tell her. I wouldn't. This is ridiculous, she snapped. I'm putting your father on. I heard fumbling, my dad's angry, muffled voice. Just give me the phone, Denise. Samantha, he barked into the phone. Hi, Dad. Don't hi, Dad, me. Your mother is hysterical. You should have told us. Told you what? I whispered. That you knew. That you knew the check was real. You went behind our backs. You cajored it, didn't you? You scurried off to the bank first thing in the morning like a little thief. I didn't. He's old, Sam. My father's voice suddenly changed, trying to sound reasonable, paternal. The voice he used when trying to handle a problem. He's old and he's not thinking clearly. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's playing games and you fell for it. And you've created a huge problem for this family. I didn't create anything, I said, my voice suddenly clear and cold. Listen to me, Samantha. That money is not yours. It's family money. Your grandfather is confused. You need to come here, and we are going to sort this out. We will put the money into a joint account. We will manage it for you. It's the only fair thing to do. You don't understand finances. You'll just waste it on your hobby. It's not a hobby, I said. This is not up for debate, he shouted. You have put this family in a terrible position. You should have told us. You laughed at it, I said, the words finally coming out, sharp and undeniable. You didn't even open it. You called it a joke. A long, terrible silence. I had said the truth. The one thing they couldn't argue with. My father's voice, when it came back, was flat and cold. Colder than I had ever heard it. He's an old, senile man, Samantha. And you are a very, very foolish girl. He hung up. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear, the dial tone buzzing. He's old. He doesn't know what he's doing. I looked at the number in my bank account. I looked at the wooden box on my desk, the one I had built with him. Money doesn't test people. Gratitude does. My parents were wrong. I knew with a sudden, terrible clarity that my grandfather knew exactly what he was doing. Phew. A lot just happened, right? If you're still hooked on this wild ride, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. More stories like this are coming, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. The next 2 days were the longest of my life. I was a ghost in my own apartment. I didn't answer my phone. I didn't check my email. My parents called again and again and again. Their names would flash on the screen, Mom, Dad, and I would just watch, my stomach twisting until it went to voicemail. Their messages were a study in manipulation. My mother's were first, tearful, pleading. Samantha, darling, please call me. We're just worried about you. Your father was upset. He didn't mean it. We just want to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. My father's were different. Short, angry, authoritative. Samantha, stop this childish behavior. Call me now. Then the text started. We know you're there. This is irresponsible. You are tearing this family apart. Me. I was tearing the family apart. Not their greed. Not their laughter. Me. I turned my phone off. The silence was better, yes, but somehow it was also worse. The $100,000 sat in my checking account, a silent, menacing bomb. I was terrified to touch it, terrified to even look at it. I bought groceries with my credit card. It didn't feel like my money. It felt like evidence. I couldn't work. I sat at my design table, staring at a blank page, trying to sketch. But my hands were still shaking. The colors all looked wrong. Everything seemed gray. I was alone. I was rich, I guess. And I had never felt more alone in my entire life. On the second day, I couldn't take it anymore. I turned my phone back on, ignoring the dozen new messages from my parents. I called the only person I could. Zoe? Sam? Oh my God, are you alive? I was about to call the police. Zoe Harper, my best friend since college. She was my opposite, loud, funny, and utterly fearless. She was a lawyer, a real one, as my father would often sneer, working for legal aid, helping people who had nothing. My parents hated her. They said she was aggressive and a bad influence. I'm not okay, Zoe, I whispered, the tears finally starting, quiet, tired tears I hadn't allowed myself to shed. Where are you? I'm coming over. No, I need to get out of here. Can I meet you? We met at our favorite diner, a cozy place that smelled of coffee and bacon. I slid into a booth in the back, my hands wrapped around a hot mug of tea. Zoe slid in across from me, her sharp, dark eyes scanning my face with concern. Okay, she said, all business. You look like hell. Start from the top. What did they do? So I told her. Everything. The dinner, the laughter, the dismissive pretend check comments. My parents' disgust. Grandpa's sad eyes, his quiet words, keep it safe. Zoe just listened, her face getting tighter and tighter, a storm brewing behind her eyes. Then I told her about the next morning, the deposit, the number. Zoe's eyes went wide. $100,000. Sam. Shoo. I hissed, glancing around the diner. Holy, she whispered. Then I told her about the phone calls, my mother's mortifying experience, the stopped checks, my father's foolish girl pronouncement. When I finished, I was openly crying now, quiet, exhausted tears rolling down my face. Zoe was silent for a moment, staring into her coffee cup. Zoe? She looked up, her face not sad, but utterly furious. Zoe, don't. I'm going to kill them, she said, her voice a low growl. I am. I'm a lawyer. I can find a way to make it legal. You are tearing this family apart. I repeated my father's words, bitterly. They're not a family, Sam, she retorted, her voice cutting. They're a corporation, and you just messed with their bottom line. It's not funny, Zoe. I'm not laughing. She's right, I'm not laughing, she said. I am furious. They've been treating you like this your entire life, like you're the broken, weird one, just because you're decent. And now your grandpa finally calls them on it. He finally shows you what you're worth, and they call you a thief for being grateful. I don't know what to do, I whispered, feeling completely lost. I'm so scared. Scared of what? Them, Sam? They can't do anything. It's your name on the check. It's in your account. It's your money. Game over. It's not about the money, I said, a little too loud. It's him. It's Grandpa. What did I just do? Did I just get him in trouble? Is he okay? What if my dad is right? What if he's not, thinking clearly? Zoe's face softened. She reached across the table, grabbing my hand. Her grip was warm and strong. Sam, look at me. Your grandfather is a genius. He is the smartest one in this whole mess. He's not old and confused, he's strategic. He knew exactly what they would do. He's been watching them. He's been watching you. This wasn't a gift of money, Sam. It was a gift of truth. I took a shaky breath, feeling a glimmer of hope. So, what do I do now? Nothing, she said firmly. You live your life. You pay off your loans. You rent that studio you've been dreaming about. You use it. That's the best thank you can give him. And you block your parents' numbers. I can't do that. Okay, fine, she sighed, a small smile playing on her lips. Baby steps. Just wait. Wait for the next move. I drove home, feeling not better, but decidedly stronger. Zoe had put some much-needed steel in my spine. Asterisk, he's a genius. It was a gift of truth. Asterisk, as I got to my apartment, I checked my mailbox. And there it was. Not a plain business envelope this time. It was thick, heavy, cream-colored cardstock. My name, Samantha, was written on the front in my grandfather's distinct, strong, clear, old-fashioned script. My heart jumped back into my throat. This was it. I went upstairs, my keys shaking slightly in my hand. I sat on my sofa and opened it. There was no letter, no explanation, just a single card, as thick as the envelope itself. It was printed, not handwritten. Dinner. Saturday. 7 p.m. Underneath, the address of his house. Not my parents' house. His house. That was all. My blood ran cold. This was the next move. This was the showdown. I called Zoe. He invited me to dinner, I said. Saturday. Okay, she said, her voice cautious. Just you. I think so. It just has the time and place. So what? Zoe's voice took on that lawyer-like edge. You think he's about to confront them? Is he going to have them there? Is this an ambush? I looked at the simple, elegant card. Dinner. Saturday. 7 p.m. I thought about the stop checks. I thought about the $100,000 in my bank account. I thought about the decades of watching and listening and testing. A calm, cold, sad feeling settled over me. No, Zoe, I said quietly, staring at the card. I don't think he's about to confront them. Then what? I think he already did. I paused. I think the test is over. This is him announcing the results. The drive to my grandfather's house on Saturday night was the loneliest drive of my life. My little car felt insignificant on the wide, dark roads that led to his old neighborhood. My parents lived in their new, flashy development. Grandpa lived in the original, established, wealthy part of town. His house wasn't a modern white and glass box like theirs. It was a 30-year-old brick house, solid and timeless and real, set back from the road, hidden by ancient, enormous oak trees. I parked behind a row of other, much more expensive cars. And then I saw it, my parents' silver Mercedes. My stomach plummeted. They were here. This wasn't just announcing the results. This was an execution. And I didn't know if I was the guest of honor or the main course. I walked to the front door, the frantic thump of my heart echoing in my ears. I thought about turning around, about getting in my car, driving back to Portland, and never speaking to any of them again. But then I thought of Grandpa, his sad eyes, his quiet command, keep it safe. I had to see this through. I rang the doorbell. It opened almost immediately. Not Grandpa. It was his housekeeper, Maria, who had worked for him for as long as I could remember. She smiled at me, a warm, genuine smile. Samantha, he is waiting for you in the study. Are my parents here? I whispered. Maria's smile faded slightly. They're in the dining room, she said, her tone conveying everything. She led me down the hall. My parents' house was all harsh white walls and blinding lights. Grandpa's house was warm. The walls were lined with books, the dark wood floors covered in old, beautiful rugs. It smelled like old books and wood polish and the faint, comforting scent of his pipe tobacco. It smelled like home. She opened the doors to the study. Grandpa Walter was sitting behind his huge, dark desk. He wasn't working. He was just sitting there, hands folded, waiting for me. Hello, Samantha, he said, his voice calm. Grandpa, I managed, a lump forming in my throat. I wanted to run to him, to cry, to ask a million questions. But I just stood there. You look nervous, he observed. I am. Don't be, he said, a faint smile. You've done nothing wrong. Sit down. I sank into the big leather chair across from his desk. He looked at me, his eyes clear and sharp. You got my invitation? I nodded. They're here, aren't they? Yes, he said. They are. Now, before we go in there, I want you to know something. What happens in that room tonight has nothing to do with you. It is not your fault. It is not your problem. This is between me and them. It has been for 30 years. Your only job tonight is to be quiet and to be real. Can you do that? Be real. Just be yourself, Sam. That's all you've ever been. It's all I've ever asked. He stood up, an old man, but he stood up straight, powerful, wearing a dark suit, not his usual old sweater. Let's go to dinner, he said. He put his hand on my back, and we walked out of the study. We walked down the hall to the dining room. I felt like I was walking into a bad dream. My parents were standing stiffly by the fireplace, not speaking. My mother, Denise, was in an expensive black dress, her smile stretched so tight it looked like it might crack. Her eyes were red. My father, Charles, stood with his hands shoved in his pockets, staring into the unlit fireplace, his face tight, blotchy red with anger. They both turned as we entered. My mother's eyes flew to me, her wobbling smile a mask. Samantha, you came. Then she looked at Grandpa. Dad, this is a surprise. Is it? Grandpa said, his voice utterly calm. He walked to the head of the table. Please sit. My parents sat stiffly on one side. I sat on the other, alone. Grandpa remained standing at the head of the table. He wasn't carrying a platter of food. He was carrying a thin, legal folder made of beige cardstock. He set it on the table in front of him. The sound was soft, but it echoed loudly in the heavy silence. You'll each find your name on these papers, he said. He didn't look at the folder. He looked directly at my parents. My mother's voice cracked. She burst into tears. Not sad tears. These were angry, frustrated tears. You humiliated us, Dad, she cried, her voice rising. You stopped our checks. You made us look like fools after all we've done for you. What have you done for me, Denise? Grandpa asked, his voice still quiet, still calm. It cut through her sobs like a knife. She stopped, gasping. We. I did stop the checks, Grandpa said, nodding calmly. I did. He looked at my mother. He looked at my father. For 30 years, I have given you everything. A house, cars, a job you don't do, an allowance for a woman your age. I have given and you have taken. And you have not once said thank you and meant it. That's not true, my father interjected, finally finding his voice. At Christmas, Grandpa continued, as if my father hadn't spoken, I gave you a final gift. A simple test. I gave you the same thing I gave Samantha. My parents both looked at me, my mother's gaze pure venom. I gave you a check, a real one, a gift. And you laughed. You laughed at me. You threw it on the sideboard with the garbage. You rolled your eyes, Denise. You smirked, Charles. You called me a joke. His voice was so calm. That's what made it so terrifying. He wasn't yelling. He was simply stating facts. It was a test, my father shouted, slamming his fist on the table, making the crystal glasses rattle. A sick, twisted old man's game. Life is a test, Charles, Grandpa said. You failed. And her, my father yelled, pointing a furious finger at me, a vein throbbing purple in his forehead. You rewarded her for what? For doing nothing. For being a failure. For wasting her potential. She's done nothing. The room went utterly silent. I could feel all their eyes on me. I felt small. I felt like I was 12 years old again, in that itchy red sweater, my face a mask. I looked at my grandfather. He was still looking at my dad. She did everything, Grandpa said, his voice so quiet, so full of power, I almost cried. She did everything. He repeated. She listened. When I spoke, she listened. When I taught her, she learned. She works. She builds. She respects herself. She said thank you for a gift she didn't even know was real. He turned his clear, steady eyes on me. She didn't laugh. The silence that followed was sacred. That's the only word for it. It was the sound of a 30-year-long life finally dying. It was the sound of truth filling a room. My father's face was chalk white. My mother was completely, utterly silent, her mouth agape. They had nothing left to say. He had taken all their words away. My grandfather, Walter Reed, did not move. He stood at the head of his table, a king in his own home. My father's fist was still clenched on the table. My mother's face was pale and blotchy. Grandpa picked up the thin beige folder. He opened it. He slid it across the polished wood table. It stopped right in front of me. "This is yours, Samantha," he said. I looked down, my hands trembling in my lap. I was afraid to touch it. My father leaned forward, squinting. "What is that? What is this?" "More games." I placed my hands on the folder. I opened it. It was not a check. It was paper after paper of legal documents. My eyes scanned the words, not fully comprehending them all. I saw last will and testament of Walter Reed. I saw durable power of attorney. I saw transfer of first deed. I saw articles of incorporation for Reed Construction. And on every single page, in the places for executor or beneficiary or trustee, I saw my name, Samantha Reed. My breath left my body. This wasn't the $100,000. This was everything. This was the company, the house, the trust. "What is that?" my mother whispered, her face pale, looking truly sick now. "What is that, Samantha?" she asked again, her voice rising in a desperate plea. I couldn't speak. I just looked at my grandfather. "It's my estate, Denise," Grandpa said calmly. "It's my legacy." You can't do that," my mother stammered. "You can't. Charles is your son. He's the vice president. It's his." "Charles has a title," Grandpa said, his voice unwavering. "He does not have the job. He has never done the job. He has a salary which I have paid." "You can't do this," my father roared, standing up, his chair scraping violently on the wood floor. "I'm your son. She's a child. She doesn't know anything. She knows how to work," Grandpa said. "She knows how to listen. She knows how to build." "This is illegal," my father yelled. "You're old. You're senile. She tricked you. She manipulated you." He looked around the room frantically, desperate for someone to agree. "You're not well, Dad. You're sick. You need help. We're going to get you help." My mother caught on immediately. "Yes, Dad. You're not thinking clearly. This test, it's not normal. We're worried about you." They were trying to take his power, trying to call him crazy. I watched, horrified, as they tried to turn this on him. Grandpa just watched them. He let them talk. He let my father rant. He let my mother cry her fake, worried tears. He let the silence stretch out after they were done, after they had said all the ugly, desperate things. My father was breathing hard, his suit jacket bunched up. My mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin, her face a mask of false concern. Grandpa waited. Then he spoke, and his voice was not the voice of a senile old man. It was the voice of the man who built a company from a single truck. It was steel. "I am not sick, Charles. I am not confused, Denise. I have never seen more clearly in my entire life." He looked at my father. He looked at my mother. "I already have," he said. My mother looked confused. Have what?" "You said I can't do this," Grandpa said. "I'm telling you, I already have. The papers are signed. They are filed. My lawyer, Mr. Miller, has the originals. These are your copies. It is done." My father's face crumpled. The anger, the bluster, it just died. He looked old. He looked weak. He looked like an empty room. He sank back into his chair. My mother started to speak. But Grandpa's voice cut through the air. It wasn't loud. It was final. He looked at his son. He looked at his daughter-in-law. "Now I know who's real." That was it. That sentence. Just 5 words. But it was the end. It ended everything false in that room. It ended 30 years of lies. It ended the perfect image. It ended the hard work. It ended them. My mother stood up, her movements stiff, almost robotic. She picked up her purse. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Grandpa. She just walked to the door. My father sat there for another second, looking at the folder in front of me, then at his father. His eyes were full of something I had never seen before. It wasn't anger. It was hate. A deep, cold, empty hate. Then he stood up, straightened his suit jacket, and followed his wife out of the room. We just sat there. We heard the front door open. We heard it slam shut. The slam echoed through the big, quiet, solid house. And then there was peace. We sat in the silence. I was still staring at the open folder. Executor, Trustee, Samantha Reed. My hands were shaking. I was rich. I was in charge of everything. I looked at my grandfather. He was still standing. He looked tired. He looked old, yes, but he looked free. He let out a long, long breath, a sound that seemed to have been held in for 30 years. Well, he said, his voice soft now. I suppose Maria has kept dinner warm. He sat down, picking up the small bell by his plate and ringing it gently. I just stared at him. Grandpa, I whispered, my voice broken. I can't. Can't what? He asked, a gentle curiosity in his eyes. I don't know how to do this. The company, the trust. I'm a designer. I paint walls. I don't know how to run a construction company. Maria came in, pushing a cart. She didn't look surprised that my parents were gone. She just started setting out plates, roasted chicken, vegetables, warm bread. Grandpa looked at me, and he smiled. A real, warm smile that reached his eyes. I taught you how to build a table, didn't I? Yes, but you started with a pile of wood. You measured. You cut. You learned the joints. You learned the bones. It's the same thing, Sam. Just a bigger table. He put a piece of chicken on my plate. We'll hire people to do the parts you don't know. You just be the boss. You just be real. You'll be fine. You're the only one I trust to be. We ate dinner, just the two of us at that long, polished table. We didn't talk about money. We didn't talk about my parents. We didn't talk about the folder, which I had closed and placed carefully on the chair next to me. He asked me about my work. Tell me about that project you were working on, he said. The one for the new family and the small apartment, the nursery. That's the one. And so I told him. I told him how I had built a crib with storage drawers underneath. I told him about the soft yellow color I found, how it made the tiny room feel sunny and big. He listened. He nodded. Smart, he said. Good bones. We talked about spring planting, about the new rose bushes he wanted along the front walk. I told him which colors I thought would look best. We talked like we always had. After dinner, we had coffee in the study. Before I left, he walked me to the door. I'm scared, Grandpa, I said, my voice quiet. I know, he said, his heavy, warm hand resting on my shoulder. That's why I know you're the right one. The ones who aren't scared? They're the problem. He reached into his pocket and handed me a small, folded piece of paper. Not a check. Just a note. Read this later, he said. He hugged me tightly. Drive safe, Sam. I drove home, feeling numb, floating. When I got to my apartment, I sat on my sofa and opened the note. His handwriting. Money changes hands every day. Respect only once. I cried. I finally cried. Not for my parents. Not for the money. I cried for him. For his long, lonely life, watching his family turn into fakes. I cried because he saw me. A week later, I sat in a big, polished office. The sign on the door read Miller. Grant and Associates. Grant Miller was a kind man with glasses and a gentle smile. He looked a little like my grandfather. Your grandfather is a very, very smart man, Samantha, he said, as I signed my name, page after page. He's put a lot of trust in you. I know, I said. My hand was steady. The numbers didn't matter. The money was just money. It was a tool. It was a result. The lesson mattered. I'm still a designer. I have a studio now, a beautiful one. I hire other young designers, and I pay them well. I'm also the boss of Reed Construction. I sit at a big table in a boardroom. I listen. I learn. I make decisions. It's just a bigger table. I never heard from my parents. Not directly. Their lawyers sent letters, of course. They tried to contest the will, claiming Grandpa was senile and under undue influence. But Grandpa was smart. He had been documenting his clear mind for years. He had letters from doctors. He had video recordings. The case was thrown out. They lost. They lost everything because they had already lost. They thought the check was fake. But the only fake thing in that house that Christmas night was their love. I still drive past that first bank sometimes. The one where I made the deposit. I remember the feeling, the shaking hands, the dread. And I remember the call that changed everything. It wasn't the call from the bank telling me the money was real. It was the call from my father telling me I was a foolish girl. That was the moment. The moment I knew he was wrong. The moment I knew my grandfather was right. The moment I finally understood what I was worth. And that decency, quiet and simple and real, was finally worth more than dollars. Thanks for watching. This whole experience still shapes me every single day. So, I have to ask, if you were in my grandfather's shoes, would you have done the same thing? Or would you have handled it differently? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear what you think.